Deep Dive with Dr. D. This podcast has one main goal: to help you to see that within you, you have the amazing potential to do great things. Dr. D gives information based on his full life experience, going from the streets to living the amazing life he has today. Hi everyone, Dr. D here, and on this deep dive, the topic is communication. Oh yeah, this can be a heavy topic for some people. One thing I always like to say to start this one off is sometimes we don't communicate with people, right? And we think, I'm not going to talk to them, or I'm going to put them on ignore, or I'm going to ghost them. That's the term now. You know what? Even when you do that, isn't that communicating a lot to the people in your world? If you're ignoring someone because you're mad at them or you've had a disagreement and you put them on ignore or you ghost them, that is actually a lot of communication, right? In my journey becoming Dr. D, my undergraduate and graduate degrees are all in family studies. And within that degree program, I took a lot of coursework and learned a lot about interpersonal communication, about family systems and family dynamics and how we communicate within those roles within family systems. And I've had tons of experience, decades of experience in the workplace, right? From literally just being a line cook to being a business owner to being a college professor, and all of the different aspects of communications in all those different systems. I've been in the military. That's a whole nother way of communicating, as far as communicating across different lines, following chains of command, right? So this area has been really helpful for me to up the ante in my skill set. And I want you, remember, all of my podcasts, my whole premise for doing this is to help you to see, to realize that you have it within you to do amazing things. I know it, and I want you to know it. And how are you going to achieve those amazing things? You're going to have to put in the work. There's no magic bullet for this. There's no magic wand that Dr. D is going to come and go, there you go, you've achieved everything you want to achieve. No, it takes work, it takes effort, and it takes a lot of communication. A lot of communication with those in your circle of influence. A lot of communication with those that need to get you, that you need in your life to get you to where you want to go. So this is one area that I'm really passionate about, is enhancing my skill set when being a communicator in my life. So I'm going to give you a Reader's Digest, a brief talk today on a lecture I give titled Effective Communication. So join with me as I walk through this. So the first thing is to understand the basics of communication, right? Assess for yourself, think about for yourself, and you can do this by journaling, by asking people in your world, by just evaluating how successful you are as a communicator. How well are you communicating what you're thinking and feeling to those in your world? Do you find yourself walking away from communicating with people in your world satisfied, like they understood what you said and felt, and or you understood what they said and felt? Or do you walk away from a lot of communications frustrated, sad, mad, angry, right? That's an easy way to assess how effective of a communicator you are. There are two aspects of communication that are really interesting to think about. And one is perceptual accuracy. How well do you perceive others' meanings when they communicate to you? And then predictive accuracy. How well you can predict how others are going to respond in that communication. And I give the example, go back to childhood, think back to when you're living, if you had two parents in your home. I mostly had one single mom raising four of us, right? We had dads of the week and all that. But if you had two adult figures in the home, two parents, mom, dad, or mom and mom, dad and dad, I don't give, whatever it is, who did you go ask for the keys to the car? If you wanted to take your date out on a Friday night and you wanted to use the car, who did you go ask knowing that you were more likely to get a yes? And when I ask this question in an in-person lecture, usually hands go, I ask mom, because mom would be more likely, right? That's your predictive accuracy. How well you can predict how others are going to respond. Who you're going to get the yes from. Think of the workplace, right? Have you had bosses along the way? You're like, oh, I'm not going to ask them because I know what they're going to say. Predictive accuracy. And then think of your circle of influence. I've talked about your circle of influence. Those 4 or 5 people that you communicate with on a regular basis. Remember, I'm going to say this as many times as I can. You are the sum of the 4 or 5 people in your circle of influence. They are either helping you get toward or away from your goals. Now, back to this. Perceptual accuracy. How well do you perceive the meanings of those people in your circle of influence, right? And I always ask this, do you have a friend in your life that almost from day one, it's just like you guys just click, right? You guys talk and you always walk away from that conversation feeling like you were heard and the other person feels like they were heard. You don't feel like you were judged harshly, like they maybe gave you some input, right? Someone you just click with, right? Like I have my best friend, Sarah. And her and I, from day one, we've known each other for over 20 years, we just clicked. It's just like we just get. Now, that's actually not always the case. You might have a best friend. I have really good friends. My other best friend, Jay, him and I have known each other for 20 years, I think, 20 plus years, right? We've always clicked in some ways, kind of on a brotherly level, but we've also had to learn about each other, learn that perceptual and predictive accuracy. So those are some of those fundamental processes of communication. Now, I'm doing this with you in this podcast. You're listening to my voice, but guess what? Most of what you're getting from me, beside the verbals, are nonverbal communication. Studies, right? If you want to point to studies, most studies point to 80 to 90% plus of overall communication is nonverbal. So, is it any surprise that social media is a terrible place to have heated conversations? Is it a shocker that we go to social media and someone brings up a topic and it turns into a shit show because everyone's just typing, right, from behind a screen? We don't have the nonverbals. We need the nonverbals to understand the whole of a communication. It occurs with or without the spoken word, right? Nonverbals. What are nonverbals? Facial expressions, motions of the body, eye contact, patterns of touch, all of those nonverbals. As I'm recording this, I'm doing my nonverbals. They're just natural for me, right? The lowering and raising of my voice, the how I say the words, and I'm doing my hand gestures, right? When I teach, when I give this lecture in a classroom or at an event, I'm moving around the room, right? Whole set of nonverbals that we all have at differing levels. Your body orientation, right? You can see that. Erect posture, if you're standing tall, that's why your mom or your dad, stand tall and be proud. Why? Well, that tends to exude confidence and honesty, right? Slouching, right? There's a reason our parents and grandparents always said, sit up straight. They want us to feel proud. They want us to show confidence. And there's some physiological stuff to that I talk about. If you're slouched down in a chair, just think, I'm doing it as I'm recording this. If I'm slouched down in a chair, if I'm slumped over, that actually constricts my blood flow. Now, here's what happens. Watch, you're going to sense what happens as I do this. If I sit up, wow, my blood flow automatically flows smoothly and I talk more confidently. I feel better physically, right? So erect, stand tall. Actually, standing desks now are a thing in offices. They're commonplace. I love my standing desk because I feel better when I'm standing as opposed to sitting crouched in a chair feeling constricted. Touch. Touch is a way of communicating. It can be used in very positive ways to help build rapport or trust. I say in the workplace, don't touch. right? It can be perceived differently. You got to remember, perception can be reality, especially when you're communicating. You got to be really careful. It depends on how well you know someone or don't know someone, right? Your physical appearance. Again, when I give this talk in the classroom, I'll have the tallest person come up and I'll have the shortest person come up. Think about that. Just your physical size is a nonverbal communication tool. So just having an awareness for yourself. What are your nonverbals when you're communicating, right? Keep that in mind, and that does have an effect on your overall communication. I'm going to slide right into the most important part of being an effective communicator in the world today. And I'm going to start this with, we are all terrible listeners. I know, you're like, no, I'm the best listener in the world. No, just hear me out. We all have the ability to be good listeners by enacting some purposeful skills when someone asks to talk to us. But with our society today, with the massive amount of information we have coming at us at any given time, with our devices, with our laptops, with the internet, it's really become hard to be a good listener. So what is listening, right? It's the process of receiving information. And I'm recording these on YouTube. You can see this physical lecture that I'm recording, and you'll see the slide that I have here, but I'm going to tell you what it is if you're just listening to the process or listening to the podcast. There are 5 physiological steps, biological, physiological steps that our brain goes through when we're listening. One is we receive the information. You're receiving the information through this podcast. Do you understand the information that's being given to you? Think of really hard classes maybe you took in high school or college. Math, biology, chemistry. Those don't come naturally for a lot of people. So you really, do I understand what's coming at me? And if it's coming rapid fire, am I able to do the third step, which is remember it? So we receive, we understand, we remember, and then I say, I smoked a lot of pot in my day. I mean, a lot. You guys know I'm in long-term recovery, and that's my kind of knee-jerk answer when I don't remember something. Sorry, I smoked a lot of pot. But also there's other reasons. It could be the noise in the room. It could be the background when you hear me recording this podcast. That's why I try to lower the distractions when I record these so that you don't have background noise that's causing you to not be able to understand or remember it, right? So you receive, you understand, you remember. And the fourth one, I'm going to start it with this. Hear me out. Evaluating, judging, criticizing. And here's what I'm going to say to you. We all do it. We all judge. I know students see me in the classroom and I have my own kind of style, right? And I'm sure they look at me. Some of them go, who does he think he is? Wearing why would he choose to wear that, right? We all judge. It's okay. It's okay that just you're going to do that. What's important about it is what you do with that information, right? Just because someone doesn't look how you want them to look or isn't talking exactly how you want them to talk or isn't saying the exact words in the way you believe, that doesn't mean it's bad, right? Everyone's different, but we all do it. Evaluate. And then, here we go. Then the 5th step. So there's 4 steps, then we respond. Now, so 5 steps: receiving, understanding, remembering, evaluating, and then responding. And in a lot of cases, this happens rapid fire. Like we're talking to our friends and we're just having casual conversations, or Katrina and I in the house when we're talking, we're bantering, it's back and forth. We have our Monday night dinners where sometimes it's just really casual with the fam, right? The family's over, just bantering back and forth. So it happens rapid fire. You're doing it rapid fire. Now, here's what I say. If you need to have a serious conversation, or there's any chance of heightened negative emotions, or I say, if you get called into HR, right? Or if your boss comes into your office and they close the door behind them and they say, hey, we need to talk, that's when you need to slow all of this down. Receiving, understanding, remembering, evaluating, and responding. Okay? So normal, everyday conversation, hey, not a big deal. Just rapid fire. But if there's any chance, this is where being an effective communicator is really good. If there's any chance of heightened negative emotion or a workplace scenario where you get called into HR or you're a boss and you need to talk to someone about a serious situation, really slow that down. Now, there's some common barriers to being an effective listener. I gave the one that we all have. It's the massive amount of information we have coming at us at any time. In just the 20, 30 minutes that I'm recording this podcast, if you listen to the whole thing, my educated guess is that you've been looking at your phone, you might be checking emails, you might be getting messages that puts information in your brain and you think, oh, I got to respond to that later. Oh, I have this project deadline. Oh, I got to go pick up Johnny from band practice. Oh, let me go look at the news. Oh God, look at all that information, right? So we just all have that. And then there's some other common ones that always come up. If you're taking a class or going through a training and you don't really see the importance, an uninteresting topic, that can be a barrier to an effective listener. And here's what I'm going to say. If you're a parent, if you're a manager, or if you're a leader, we're all leaders in some way, but if you're running a business, you are going to have people coming to you that you need to listen to, and the topic might not be your favorite topic. I already alluded to this one, criticizing the speaker and not the message. Like, I love teaching. Like, I know that there are probably some people who see me give lectures and go, oh my God, he needs to ramp it down a notch. Who does he think he is? He's just way too animated, right? You're criticizing the speaker, and then you're not listening to what the message is that could be great information for you. The other one is concentrating on details, not main ideas. Someone is giving you information and you get stuck on that one piece way back at the beginning of the conversation and you haven't been listening all the way through. Failing to adjust to distractions is a huge one. And all of us have one big distraction, and it's our mobile device. It's our phone. And so here's what I say to you with the failing to adjust to distractions. Here's what I do anytime someone wants to meet with me and it's going to be an important topic, or if a student wants advising, the first thing I do is I put it in my calendar and I block out that time. And I'm going to give you the example of me meeting with a student on campus. If a student wants to meet with me for advising or talk about coursework or talk about life, whatever it is, I block that time out on my calendar. I set a reminder. So I know, oh, it's coming. And then when that person comes to my office door, I turn away. I actually have my office designed. I encourage you to think about your space. If you have an office or a space where you talk to people regularly, I learned this in counselor school years ago. I turn away from my desk. The only thing between me and the person I'm talking to is air. You can come to my office and see I have 2 comfortable chairs to sit in to have conversations. And my device, my phone, I leave it on my desk. Why? I'm a shiny object guy, right? Like squirrel, right? Yeah, all of us kind of have that at some level. So I need to reduce those distractions so my attention can be on that person who has asked to have a conversation with me. The last one I want to talk about is faking attention. And here's my advice to you. Think about it. Can you tell when someone isn't really there? Can you tell pretty quickly when someone's saying they're listening to you that they're not? Yeah, humans, we can tell that. So here's what I'm going to say to you. If you can't have the conversation right now, like couples, I give them the advice, it's okay to take a break. Schedule an important conversation so that you're not faking attention. Because that's about, for me, it's like, oh, that's a no-go. Don't do that. Reschedule the conversation. Have the conversation at a time when you will be present, when you will adjust to the distractions. And then the last one is avoiding difficult listening situations. I give this example. It's pretty funny. Think about when you were a kid and you got in trouble. Let's say mom or dad said, hey, I need to talk to you after school because I got your report card. And you know that you had classes that your grades slipped. So what do? You're like, oh gosh, all of a sudden I have band practice or I have a sports practice, right? So your mom or dad says, okay, well, I'm going to talk to you later when you get home. And what do? You make sure you get home late enough so that they're in bed. That's avoiding difficult listening situations. All of these are common barriers to being a good listener, being an effective communicator. Now, how can you improve your listening competence? Easiest thing is what I talked about. Be prepared to listen. If someone in your world who's important to you, or if it's part of your job and they report to you and you're a manager or leader, be prepared to listen. Put it on your calendar. Make sure you don't have interruptions during the time that you've set aside for this person. And it's okay to take notes. I've been to lots of counseling, right? I've had therapists and I've been a counselor in my past. It's okay to take notes. That's important. And especially in the workplace, if you're going to an HR situation or an important meeting, you see everyone taking notes. That's not a bad thing. The other one is rephrase as you're listening, especially those important conversations where there's conflict or the potential for conflict. Rephrase what you hear the person saying. Don't parrot it, don't mimic, don't mock them, but say, what I hear you saying is you're frustrated because we've made dates to go out to dinner and they've been canceled and you believe that it's because I've canceled them. That's rephrasing the speaker's comments. And you can ask them, is that what you said? And they'll tell you, people will tell you, right? So that's one way to do. And ask questions. If you don't understand something, it's okay to ask questions for clarity. If you do it in a non-judgmental way, if you're using, I probably won't talk about it in this one, but using I statements is a really good thing to employ in your conversations, in your communication repertoire, especially those difficult conversations. You can Google what are I statements when talking about being an effective communicator, and you'll learn what using. It's about not always pointing the finger, not using you statements. You did that and I'm not happy. You always do this. Don't do that. Don't use those all-inclusive statements, because is someone always making mistakes? Probably not. Be specific. Alas. In closing this one up, what can you do to improve your overall communication? Well, employ some of the skills I've talked about. And the Gottman Institute, which when I was in my undergraduate and graduate work, I learned about the Gottman Institute. It's a couple that they're professors at the University of Washington, and they've studied couples and business communications for years and years and years. They have lots of data to support that doing some of these things that I'm talking about will really help you be an effective communicator. And the other thing you can do, like I like to say, is communicate often. Like I've seen couples who live in the same house, but they hardly talk to each other. And then when conflict happens, it's this really big thing, right? So communicate often. If you're a manager or a leader, make sure you're communicating with those people that report to you often. That way, when there is conflict, it's not going to be as heavy. Use confirming messages and responses. I think about my relationship with my wife. Her and I, we have conflict, but even in conflict, we're always a team. That's one of our core things in our marriage, is we are a team no matter what. And so we might be in conflict where she's struggling with something or I'm struggling with something, and we'll just kind of throw it in there somewhere at an appropriate spot. It'll just happen. Hey, you know what? This is really hard, but I want you to know that we're going to get through this together. Self-disclosure can be a great tool. This is where I put my counselor hat on, or my professor hat, or my parent hat, right? Self-disclosing can be a great tool. Don't self-disclose everything right out of the gate with people you meet, someone you just meet like your whole life. That can be scary, but you can use self-disclosure as a very good tool in communication. Revealing a little bit about yourself as a tool to show empathy and understanding can be really good. Being that active listener, and I talked about how to be an active listener, right? Be prepared to listen. Make sure you remove those distractions when you're talking to someone. And humor. Humor is good, right? Communicate often. Use humor as part of your overall communication repertoire. Me and Katrina laugh more than we're mad at each other. I remember during the pandemic, right? All of a sudden, couples were together 24/7. And I say this, I married Katrina. I want to be with her for the rest of my life, right? I love spending time with her. But was it my goal in marrying her to be with her 24/7? No, right? She has her individual life. I have my individual life, right? And we see each other every day. We talk throughout the day. Absolutely. Well, what happened during the pandemic? All of a sudden, we were on lockdown 24/7. Some couples ended up getting divorced. And it goes back to because they weren't used to communicating. They didn't communicate much. All of a sudden, you're stuck in the house. Well, I can tell you, me and Katrina, we laughed more than we got mad at each other. Did we get frustrated with each other because all of a sudden we're with each other all the time in this small space, blah, blah, blah. But we used a lot of humor. So use humor in your life. It's a really good tool to use. And I'm going to close this one up. And it's about, I'm going to start it with a quote about conflict. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of creative alternatives for responding to conflict. Listen, conflict is not bad. It's going to be normal that people are going to disagree. You're going to disagree with your spouse, your loved ones, people in your circle of influence, people that you work with, right? It's how we deal with conflict that is key. And you can apply some of these tools that I talked about in this short podcast to be a better communicator overall and to be better when there is conflict. I hope everyone has a great day, and I hope you're enjoying this podcast. As always, thanks for listening. Episodes are released twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. You can also follow me on my other social media channels in the description.